Hey YouTubers and train lovers, I'm going to show you my Richart military set. And this is we're looking at right now is the lead engine, which is half tank and half engine and locomotive. And you'll see it has twin cannons on a turret. The turret actually does spin. However, if you spin it, you're going to scratch the top. They use really good paint. They used automobile paint on this. This is a very high-end train. The wheels are nickel plated on the engine and all the cars. And I'll show you some of the things as we go by. And it's also all steel with the exception of a automobile that rides on one of the cars, which is plastic and steel. And Richart is RICH-ART. It was a company that was started back in 1973 by Dick Mayer and Art Varney down in Southern California, and it went on for 37 years. And these trains were not made in a factory, they were handmade in a shop. So a lot of detail went into them. This particular set is the Deluxe set, which is E as in Edward, D as in Dog, 927, and it was offered exclusively to members of the Toy Train Historical Foundation, whatever that is. And they only made 300 sets. They also made a lot of standard gauge items and O gauge items that were very high end. And they duplicated some Ives trains and things like that. I had this running in July in a film of tin plate military trains. And it wasn't running terribly well. It was stalling and restarting and stalling and restarting. And that's basically why I got it so cheap. A friend of mine had it underneath his layout, and he couldn't fix it. And he'd had it for several years, and he was getting rid of everything and getting ready to go into a elder home. And he asked me if I'd like to buy it, and I looked at him, and I said, how much? He said $200, and I had seen them online for $800 and $900. Now I don't know if people get the $800 or $900 for them, if they're actually worth that much now. I checked and saw this sold for around $300 when it was new in 1990. And what I found out is the center contacts, both of them were intermittently grounding on the frame as they would go up and down on their springs. And they are not like the Lionel contacts. You have one in the front, one in the rear, and not sure if you can see them with the camera, but they are almost vertical, and they were so close to the frame, and I just don't think they drilled the holes correctly, and there's no adjustment, so I just had to insulate the frame with black electrical tape and screw them back on, and the train runs fine. It does have some kind of a governor in it. It does not it only runs at one speed, and that's slow. And you really wouldn't want to be racing this train around anyway, because it's got a lot of items on the cars that would go flying off. But you can see the detail, the rivets on the door and the little vents here. Very highly detailed, and this isn't three-dimensional. You can feel these. It's not painted on like Marx did. So we've got our locomotive here, and we've got our box car, which is probably like an armaments car. Locomotive is the 9203. The box car is the 9214. I think it's interesting that they put the sliding door on the inside of the shell. And it does open all the way and close. And once again, steel and nickel-plated wheels. This is a very heavy train. Then we have our gondola, 9212, with our artillery shells, and they remind me of they look to be the same size as the Marx artillery shells for the siege gun, except Marx made them out of wood, which I think is very practical, and these guys made them out of aluminum. So I mean, they're really spending a lot of money on these things. In my opinion, unnecessarily. So we'll see a 9211 flat car here. And this is I believe a 1917 Buick touring car. And it says U.S. Army staff car. This came with a set. However, it was not made to ride on a car. This car would have carried a cannon. And you may be able to see the tabs that stick up to keep the cannon from falling off. But this car is so beautiful. And there's already a cannon on another car that I put a magnet underneath the car to hold it, underneath the automobile, to hold it to the flat car. And we're going to go up to see the airplane car. And this is number 1911 again. And the tabs are slightly different on this to keep this monoplane on here. The monoplane is cast metal, and little propeller goes around, and it has rubber tires. And it's pretty cool looking. It's definitely much more in gauge. Looks more realistic than the Marx airplane cars, which they put what looks like big bombers on little flat cars, and they're really out of gauge for the car itself. And here's our cannon car, and this cannon rolls. The wheels turn around. And once again, this is cast metal. And this is a 9211 flat car once again. And these all just lift right off. And here's our 9252 coach. So let's turn on the power and run it around once or twice. I've got a Marx out here. My Marx, one of my favorite Marx military trains, pulled by an 897. And the reason for that is I'm comparing what Marx gave you for, of course, these were made between 1939 and I believe 1940, and they were also made to look somewhat like a World War I train. And as you can see on the tender, it says Army Supply Train. But you've got your trench bags in here and your bullets that actually shoot out of this siege gun. You've got a machine gun that swivels around. Oh, it's going to shoot me. And there's a crank on the side. These are made for children, so it's for children's hands. They're a little small for me to get to. And turn them around, and there's a gear that hits a leaf spring, and it causes a clack 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 sound that sounds like a machine gun. And here is a firing anti-aircraft gun. Here is a wind-up tank that you could run around the floor, and it will it sparks like an old cigarette lighter. So it looks like the guns are firing. Let's move this train up a bit. Too far. And here is our searchlight car. Here's our U.S. Army. I'm going to turn the power off because this is humming too loud. I'm not sure what tune it is, but it's humming. This is the U.S. Army truck, and it's removable so a child could play with it on the floor. I'm sure a child did not own this one because it still has the original cover, which is made out of wagon top cover, which is made out of cardboard. And you can see the U.S. Army on the top. And here is the field gun. You have the radio car, and you have the official car. And let me tell you, if this house was on fire and I had a choice of taking two trains, I would take the Marx because it has a lot more play value. I think it's much cooler. My opinion, I think it's a better train. And plus, the motor on this, let's bring this Richart train around again. The motor on this Richart train is really overcomplicated. Turn it off, turn the power off. It's Rube Goldberg. If you know who Rube Goldberg is, it's like he designed the motor in this train. It's got a big DC can motor, and it goes about the size of one of the large old flashlight batteries, much larger than we see in our modern trains. And it's got a rectifier up here, goes through another gear and runs these front two wheels, and then there is something like a bicycle chain that, I'm not kidding, like a bicycle chain that runs the rear wheels. So it's four-wheel drive, but I'm not sure why they did this. I think they did it because this train is so heavy. I put my Lionel reproduction of the I got to get the number 203 armored military car on the front of this, and it derailed it on curves because it just weighed too much. So I guess they built this train too heavy, and they decided that okay, we got to figure out some way to make it go, and maybe this is how all their trains are powered. I don't know, but I think that bicycle chain contraption, which is actually made out of some kind of plastic, is going to break someday. So the front two wheels will run, but the rear will not run if that thing breaks. And I have no way of getting another one or replacing it. So very impractical. But an interesting train, and I like to present interesting trains to my interesting people who watch my YouTube videos. And here's what else that you got when you bought the Richart train set, the Deluxe model. You got all these soldiers. You got 7 soldiers. They're all die-cast lead, and they're World War I uniforms, and you got 12 trench bags, and here's that other cannon that would have ridden on the car that I put the staff car on instead. So here is another bonus you got. You bought this box, and you got this big map of the war area, and it says Europe and the Mediterranean, 1914, dual alliance and triple alliance, whatever the heck that means. And it's pretty cool. I see countries in here that are no longer there anymore. They've changed their name or become something else, or been swallowed up by another country. And that's where the train is stored. So that's my video for today, and my opinion about Richart. I think it was worth $200, but I sure as heck, I just looked on eBay, and there's one exactly like this, except it has some billboards, and it's patriotic billboards, and it's listed for $885. So I just had to laugh when I saw that. And I saw one on there a month ago for $900, and I have no idea if it's sold. I didn't bother to save it. But what I should have also mentioned is if you didn't want the 2 cannons, you could get a cannons on the flat cars. You could get a searchlight car. Maybe. With only 300 made, I think you probably had to settle for what you could get if you wanted one of these. But this would look cool sitting on the mantelpiece, but I don't think it's very practical to run. It's worth too dang much money, and I'd be afraid to scratch it. And I love my Marx. I'm afraid to scratch my Marx, but I'm not near as afraid as I would be with this Richart train. So once again, if I were to choose between the two, it'd be the Marx Army train. So once again, this has been a Big Lizard production, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.